Hi, I'm Dave Anderson. Welcome to the Management Training Program, 7 Truths About Servant Leadership. I have found over the years that this is a very misunderstood topic. You hear a lot, the buzzword, especially a few years back, oh, servant leadership. But do you really know what it is? And do you really know what it isn't? Because my guess is if you're watching this program, your objective is to get better at leadership. So we're going to talk in this program about a couple of areas that it is not, all right, a couple of myths. And then we'll talk about 5 ways where we can really do a great job of living servant leadership in our roles. And it may be things you're already doing now, but at least you'll have a clear understanding, hey, this is servant leadership. This isn't. I need to move away from this and move towards that. And you'll have a really concise idea of how to get that done as we conclude this program. So let's take a look at the opening thoughts. It says here, servant leadership isn't a new topic by any stretch, but was popularized actually in modern culture with a classic book. I don't know if you've read it, on the subject by Robert Greenleaf 4 decades ago. It was actually called Servant Leadership. After speaking in 16 countries and writing 13 books, working on the 14th one right now, over the past 2 decades, I find there are still several misconceptions about what servant leadership is and what it's not. Okay, in this program, I'll outline 7 truths about servant leadership, 2 myths that'll kind of get you off track, and then 5 actions, 5 steps you can take, probably are already taking, and if so, I want to reinforce them. If you're not really focused on those things, I want to get you focused on those things so you can do a better job of serving your people in the right way. All right, so first, let's start with number 1 and talk about the first myth. Myth number 1, servant leadership is about doing people's work for them. Well, that's not servant leadership. That's just plain stupid, doing everybody's work for them. And that's not servant leadership. That's just being a martyr. I'll tell you, I remember when this really came to light, I was working with a hotel group. And I had their managers in the room, and I was talking about one of my books, How to Run Your Business by the Book. And in there's some information about servant leadership. And one of the people raised their hands and said, you know, I like the idea of servant leadership, but it bothers me when they sit there and they watch me do their jobs for them. I said, oh my goodness, that is not the right idea of what servant leadership is. Let's talk about dispelling this myth. Look what it says. Servant leadership isn't about doing people's work for them. Instead, it's about equipping people to do their own work better. So it's not me doing your job for you, it's me equipping you, getting you better so you can do the job better for yourself. Of course, there are times when the team is in a pinch and you may have to jump in, right, and help someone complete a task. But ultimately, those are exceptions. Servant leadership is about creating the conditions for your people to become less dependent on you, not more dependent on you. So when you serve people in the right way, what you're doing is equipping them. You're better preparing them to do better work, not for you to do the work for them. So let's get that myth out of our minds. That's not true at all. Let's talk about myth number two. Myth number 2, servant leadership is weak or is for the weak. You know, there's this idea that servant leadership is warm and fuzzy. It's this wimpy form of leadership where I just become timid and I'm a doormat and people just take advantage of me and walk all over me. That couldn't be further from the truth. Look what it says. This misconception is brought about in part by the wrong understanding of what servant leadership is, as discussed in the prior point, right? That it's you doing the work for them while they watch you. It's exacerbated by the very nature of the word servant, because that sounds menial and substandard, right? Which, when wrongly understood in the context of leadership, can make you sound like that doormat or that wimp or that timid soul that people are just going to manipulate and take advantage of. But actually, servant leadership is not weak. It's the opposite of that. It requires great strength to serve your people well, as you will see when we go through the 5 points that are coming up next. But look what it says here in letter A. The fact is, it requires strength and humility to serve effectively, to set aside your own preferences, right? And sometimes, you know, your own comfort, your own agenda in order to invest in the development of others. And humility is misunderstood. Humility doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you think of yourself less So I'm going to shift more focus to the team, do a better job of equipping them to do better work, put aside my own preferences, my own comfort, my own agenda, so I can spend more time equipping them, right? That's what servant leadership is. I'm going to subordinate maybe what I would rather be doing right now to roll up my sleeves and help get you better so you can do better work. So those are two myths. Let's get them out of our minds. It's not at all what servant leadership is about. Now, let's talk about 5 things it is about. And as I go through here, you may be thinking, well, this is really not new. We've heard this. Maybe you've heard it, but you haven't heard it in the context of servant leadership. And I just want you to have a crystal clear idea of what it truly means to serve your people. And that if you're not doing certain things that I'm talking about here, you're doing a terrible disservice to your people as well, and you need to correct it. All right? So let's get after it here. 5 steps to serve team members. Number 1, big one, always starts here, doesn't it? You serve people by creating clarity for them. I'll tell you, the opposite is true. You do a terrible disservice by letting them just stay in the dark, by letting them live in a gray area. I think you serve people by getting really clear about what you expect and by when, eliminating gray areas, right? Here's where you have to be, here's when you have to be here. Here's a vision that unites us, right? That inspires us. Here's a mission that we all get on the same pages with. These are the outcomes I need from you. These are the activities you need to do every day to create those outcomes. Man, that is serving people at the finest, giving them a clear roadmap of what it's all about. And it's a terrible betrayal of servant leadership altogether, to keep them guessing, not to be clear. So and that's what it says here. In fact, it's a gross disservice to keep people guessing about what the following are. So in kind of bullet point fashion, let me go over these key aspects of clarity. All right, you've heard these before. You know about these. Are you doing these? Could care less if you know it. Could care less if you heard it. How strong are these areas, clarity-wise, in your department, in your organization? And if they're not what they should be, then you got to step up and do a better job of serving your people in this regard. Let's go through them. Take a look. Letter A, non-negotiable behavioral standards. In other words, core values, right? That's part of clarity. These are the behaviors that are non-negotiable. Don't care what you produce numbers-wise. If you violate these behaviors, we're going to have a problem. So how clear are they? How often do you talk about them? Are you holding people accountable for them? Let's take a look at letter B. You're going to see the words non-negotiable in here a lot, by the way. Letter B, non-negotiable outcomes they are expected to create. In other words, I need you to sell X amount this month. I need you to have the statement out by this day. I need you to get receivables down to this point by the 15th. I mean, we all get paid ultimately for outcomes. So are we clear enough about what non-negotiable outcomes we're expecting? That's a terrible disservice not to let people know that and then try to hold them accountable later for standards you were never clear about in the first place. Let's continue. Letter C. And pay attention to this one. Non-negotiable daily activities they are to engage in that are most predictive of creating the desired outcomes. I can't emphasize enough what a big one this is, because if you're going to do the last one, get the right outcomes, people need to be engaging in the right activities. All right, and so have you outlined the key activities? Now, if you've gone through my book, it's not rocket science. In a number of these programs, you know there is a ferocious focus on activities there, because if activities create the outcomes, we need to be more clear of what we're expecting from people there. So we're talking about our core values clear enough, desired outcomes clear enough, non-negotiable activities most predictive of creating those outcomes, are they clear enough? This is great serving of your people if you're really communicating this well and eliminating the guesswork and helping them and you get on the same page every day. All right, so this is a big one. This really drives point B. All right, let's continue though. We have a couple more aspects of clarity. Let's take a look here at letter D. A bold vision that inspires the team member and allows them to clearly see their expected contribution. Again, can you pass the 10-card test right now? If I walked into your department and pulled 5, 10, however many people you have available aside and had them write down the vision, I know a lot of you could pass that test. But do they feel a part of it? All right, they know what it is, if they know what it is. I hope they know what it is. If they do, you're serving them better. But do they feel a part of it? Are they moved by it? What are they doing differently today because of it? That's how you know if it's really for real. But you got to have direction, and that's what vision is. And you do a terrible disservice not giving people that bigger picture to borrow inspiration from. Because sometimes today's not all that great, right? And so if they don't have that bigger picture, that vision to draw inspiration from and make today mean more, they can start to feel a little bit lost and disengaged. And let's also talk about letter E. Letter E, a clear and compelling mission. See, mission unites us, and if we live the mission, it should take us to the vision. So a clear and compelling mission that unites the team behind a common purpose and marginalizes competing agendas. The wonderful thing about having a mission statement that unites us is now we're all sharing the same purpose, and we don't have this department running this way and that department running that way. And ideally, right, if we all live the mission every day, it should take us to the vision. These are some really vital aspects of clarity. And again, I'll say this for about the fourth time. Failing to make these clear, failing to bring these to life with good communication and good reinforcement is not serving your people well. It's really betraying your people to an extent because you're letting them live in gray, right, where there's really no winning, no losing. They're not on the same page as you. They're going in different directions, and we've got to fix that. So the first aspect of servant leadership is serving people well by really getting clear about what you expect. And look what it says here, and then we'll move on to number 2. There's certainly nothing soft or weak, right, about getting clear about what you expect from people and creating benchmarks for accountability, because everything I just mentioned, all 5 of those areas, what they do is they create a benchmark to hold people what? Accountable. And there's nothing soft, weak, wimpy, or doormat about that, right? And because we're going to talk about accountability here shortly, but what I would contend is, without this first point, right, with those 5 aspects of clarity, accountability is going to be a joke. Because the question is, accountable for what? We don't know what the vision is, what the mission is, what outcomes are expected. The values are never talked about. The daily expectations, the daily activities, have them in clearly outlined. And so listen, you want to toughen up as a leader? Stand for something. And that's what point 1's all about, standing for something and communicating what you're standing for and what you're not going to settle on or fall for. All right, let's move on to number 2. And again, number 1 had to come first, as you'll see when we get here to number 2. Take a look at number 2. You serve people by giving fast, candid feedback on performance. Ken Blanchard said feedback is the breakfast of champions. Man, that people that want to grow, they need it. Feedback eliminates gray areas. Feedback, if I'm doing well, I want to hear it. I need those behaviors reinforced so I keep doing well. If I'm doing poorly, guess what? I kind of need to hear it so I can get back on the right track. And this is what feedback does. But my point is, without the first point, you got nothing to really give feedback on. You don't have values to talk about or outcomes to discuss or behaviors that you can either reinforce or confront. And so part of serving people is, once you create clarity, giving them feedback on how well they're doing or not based on that clarity. Look what it says. Once clarity is established, this point is far easier, because you've created reference points for which you can actually give feedback on. You've established clarity, now you can give feedback. Letter A, it is a disservice to allow people to perform either well or poorly, either end of the spectrum, without either reinforcing it if they're doing well or confronting their behavior if they're doing poorly. All right. And so if people are doing well, they need to hear about it, right? They need to feedback, because if behaviors that get reinforced to get repeated. But if people are doing poorly, they need it confronted. Why? Because behaviors that are reinforced get repeated, and if you're not confronting a poor performance, you are in effect reinforcing it. You're going to see more of it. And so you got to give more feedback, eliminate the gray areas, and listen, you don't worry about if it hurts somebody's feelings. You got to worry less about their feelings and more about their future. So if they're failing, you got to let them know. You can't let them walk off the cliff on your watch. And if somebody's doing great, you got to let them know. And if it hurts this one's feelings down here because he's not hearing it, that's their problem. When they step up, they'll start to hear it. You got to do what's right, not just what's popular or easy for people to accept. That's what good servant leadership is about. All right, that's the first two, right? So we get clarity, we get feedback. Now we move on to point three, step three. Step three, you serve people by holding them what? If you need me to fill in that blank for you, you probably shouldn't even be in the room, right? All right, hold them accountable for results. Do you see why we had to do the first two steps before we get to this one? You could just stop here and have a discussion. Why does point three have to follow especially point one? Obviously, you have to have clarity before you can have accountability, because the question becomes accountable for what? And ambiguity is the enemy of accountability. So once you've done step one and two, you can really do this one well. If you're willing to serve people well, because holding them accountable is serving them. And letting them fail on your watch because you either don't have the guts or the skills to hold them accountable is a terrible betrayal of your leadership position. Look what it says. What's weak is allowing someone, see, it's not weak to hold them accountable. What's weak is allowing someone to fail on your watch because you don't have either the skills or the guts to make yourself and them uncomfortable, because it is a little uncomfortable to hold people accountable, with a tough love conversation that probably is going to involve consequences, because that's what accountability is all about. And so let's talk about it. You think servant leadership is still weak and timid and doormat stuff? No, you can see it requires that strength I was talking about earlier, because it requires a lot of strength to confront folks, apply consequences, and care enough about them to get in their face with all due respect, with tough love, and get them back on the right track and eliminate that gray area with feedback and with consequences. Take a look at letter A, please. If you care about people, you will confront them. There's that word again, right? You're going to confront them. You're not going to let them continue to do either poor behaviors, which are violating your values, or wrong actions and outcomes, right? Which are the dailies and the outcomes you expect from them every month. If you will stretch them, and you'll punish them with consequences when they deserve it. Just like you're raising your kids, if you care about them, you love them, what happens? You've got expectations they need to meet. If not, they're going to hear about it. And there are probably some, if they don't meet, there will be consequences. Why? Because you love them. Because you want to see them grow. You want them to become less dependent on you over time. And it's no different when you're building a team, when you're growing a team, serving them in this way. All right, so those first three really go hand in hand. 1, 2, 3. You have to do one before you can do two, and you have to do 1 and 2 before you can really do 3. That is servant leadership at its finest. There's 2 more points I want to talk about here. Let's look now at number 4. Number 4, you serve people by investing time and money, training, coaching, and mentoring them. Listen, I really believe if you do point 4 well, that point 3 is not going to be as big of a factor, right? I mean, if we're getting them better, and we're giving them coaching, and we're giving them training, and we're mentoring. You know, you don't have time to personally mentor everyone, but you mentor your best and brightest, and you're pouring yourselves into them. That is servant leadership. You're setting aside, you know, your agenda, your own comfort zone, maybe what you would rather be doing, and you're saying, listen, I'm going to put the focus on you. Let me invest my skills, my knowledge, my time, my experience, my talents into your life. Wow. That's big. Take a look at what it says here. If you execute this task well, training, coaching, mentoring, the unacceptable performances mentioned in the prior point, they're just going to be less common. I find people that have immense difficulties with accountability. Either they have to do it all the time, right? It just becomes this ongoing issue, is because they're not training people to know what to do or how to do it in the first place like they should. So yeah, we're going to have to continue to talk about the same issues over and over again because they're not getting better, so the situation isn't getting better. Training helps eliminate a lot of that. Not all of it. There will still be people, believe me, who know what to do and still don't do it, and you will need to hold them accountable, but this makes a lot of that go away. I really like this aspect of servant leadership. Investing your time, efforts, experiences, talents, and so forth into the life of somebody else. And just putting the focus on them, not making it about you, but making it about them, leaving them better than you find them. That is servant leadership. And it's something most of us should probably be spending more time doing. We get so busy with the stuff part of our job, we don't put enough of a priority on this aspect of it. All right, and we have one more. And I really believe once you do number 4 well, you should do number 5. Don't do number 5 unless you've done number 4. You'll see why. Let's take a look at number 5. You serve people by empowering them with broadened latitude and discretion. So once you've trained them and coached them and mentored them, now you can loosen the reins on them. Let them make more decisions. Let them take more responsibilities. Let them, get out of that comfort zone. Look what it says here. People grow when they're stretched, not when they're simply maintained. Now again, the reason I said you got to do number 4 before number 5 is you don't want to empower people that haven't been trained. You don't want to empower people that haven't had the feedback and the coaching. That is reckless, all right? I mean, to paraphrase Jim Rohn, he said if you motivate or empower an idiot, all you've got is a motivated and empowered idiot. I mean, somewhere along the line, we've got to get people better, right, before we just let them go, before we let them make more decisions, implement more ideas, and so forth. So number 4 should precede number 5. But boy, once you do number 4 and you start to empower people, now you're growing. Now you're multiplying your leadership through others, and everybody is starting to operate at a higher level. And this really helps accomplish really the first objective I talked about when we were discussing servant leadership. Remember we were talking about the myth? And I said the myth is not that you should do their work for them, but that you should equip them to do better work. If you do points 4 and 5, that's exactly what you're accomplishing. Take a look here. Letter A, the servant leader's job is to make his or her people less dependent on them. Remember, we talked about this through empowering them to make independent decisions, giving them additional responsibilities that cause them to leave their comfort zones, and enabling them to expand the value they can add to the organization. And so this is where we really start to see exponential growth in organizations, where people are less dependent on the leader because the leader has invested in those people, right? And now they're more capable to add value at a higher level, and you really start to multiply leadership. See, this is not doing their work for them. This is all about equipping them to do better work, more work, expanded work on their own. So I don't know how you're doing there. I don't know, maybe you're doing the first 3 really well and these last 2 kind of tripped you up a little bit. I mean, when is the last time you empowered someone to make a decision you used to make for them? Right? That's part of empowerment. You don't have to check with me on this anymore. All right? I've trained you. I've shown you what a good decision looks like. You go ahead and make the decision. Now, if you get up to this point, check with me. But up to that point, you own it. You're going to do great with it. When's the last time you've empowered somebody there? Who are you mentoring? Right, we could talk about this. How consistent is your training? I mean, I don't know where you're stronger, where you're weak. You do. But to continue to grow as a servant leader, we need to pay attention to all 5 of these. We can't be 1, 2, 3, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. We really need to be 5 out of 5 consistently, day in, day out, to be the best leader you can be and get the most out of the team members you've been entrusted with. Let's wrap this up here. Closing thoughts. Well, there are both additional myths and steps to take concerning servant leadership. This should give you a template, pretty good template, to evaluate your own mindset and skill set as a servant leader. In fact, if your direct reports were going to score you, right, from A through F on the impact you have on them concerning these 5 steps, how would you do? Well, why don't you go ahead and ask them? I mean, if those of you that are brave, go ahead and ask them. Make a little report card. Give a little explanation for each point. Make it anonymous. Just kind of see how you're doing there. You probably know, but if you have some blind spots, your people tend to point those out for you with a scorecard. All right, let's talk about taking some action. Let's take a look. As we talk about our truths about servant leadership, here's what I'd like you to focus on. First of all, which aspects of clarity, let's go back to those first point there, do you need to create, update, or talk more about to better serve your people? So you go look at those 5 aspects of clarity. Where do you need help? What needs to be tweaked, better communicated, updated, reintroduced, right? And then this one, what is one specific area where you can empower your people, kind of like I just said a minute ago, to be less dependent on you. That should create some good discussion as well as you share ideas and then start to take action. All right, you know what to do. Go get it done. We'll talk again real soon.